Well, hello there, folks. I am Adam Noyce. I'm one of the hosts of our show. Welcome to 10 Forward. Joining me, per usual, is my co-host, Jim Frasca. Today, we're talking about Star Trek TNG Season 3. Is it the best season of all of Star Trek? Well, stick around. Let's find out. You like to have Star Trek on in the background a lot.
Particularly when, and I have to emphasize, I do not watch while I drive, but I particularly like to listen to specifically TNG when I drive because it is a very much dialogue and politic heavy show, and you can listen to the show and not miss much.
Yeah.
And I've seen the show enough times that I know what's going on the screen. And I do just sometimes, when I'm driving, instead of listening to music or a podcast, I'll listen to Star Trek. Absolutely.
Well, I think TNG is a good show for that kind of watching because it's so episodic that you don't really need to necessarily constantly put as much effort into paying attention to what's going on, because every episode is its own standalone story. That's one of the benefits of it. That kind of style made me kind of turn back to TNG, because I needed, some stuff on in the background while I was working on other things. And so I said, I'm going to put on Star Trek Season 3. I don't want to deal with Seasons 1 and 2. Going through Season 3 again, and I looked through everything and how many episodes are there throughout all 26 episodes that we see within Season 3. This is the definitive Star Trek season, and there's only one episode I don't like.
I need to know, which one is that?
Menage a Troy. That's the one where Troy's mother.
Yes, and
Troy's mother gets kidnapped.
They pretend to love the Ferengi.
Yes, I don't really like that episode.
Is that Summer's Day?
Yes.
Yeah, not a great episode.
Not a very great episode. Also, by far the least reviewed one, or has the worst reviews out of all of them. But I'm looking at all these episodes, and not just are they good episodes, they're phenomenal episodes from pretty much beginning to end. And I argue that Season 3 is not just where TNG finally found its footing, it's where Star Trek going forward found its footing. It's that important. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jim.
I don't think that I could think of a better, like you said, single season. DS9 will always be my favorite, and there are episodes that are great in Voyager and Enterprise and all of the Star Trek shows, but I think that is a fair statement. Looking at every episode, and you give me a one-line, overview of what the episode is, and I know exactly what you're talking about because it's a memorable episode.
It is kind of interesting because seasons 1 and 2 of Star Trek are kind of like, with this reviewer that I was watching called them anomalies because they feel so different from Season 3 forward of TNG, and I completely agree with that assessment. It feels like it's a completely different show. And a lot of that comes down to the behind-the-scenes stories that were going on, because this season is when Gene Roddenberry was finally promoted so much he was essentially kicked upstairs. So he had very little control. Immediately, new uniforms, which was the first aesthetic thing to happen with Season 3. I remember when I was first watching it through where I go, oh my god, thank you. No longer are they made out of tight, ridiculously tight, impractical spandex, but they're actually made out of wool now. So they actually
look kind of like this.
Yeah, they look like you, Jim. Yeah, Jim, show that off. Jeez, woof.
I mean,
yeah, right. The Riker maneuver.
The Riker.
The costume designer for the first 2 seasons of Star Trek TNG was also the main costume designer for Star Trek TOS, which explains a lot why they made certain decisions that they made within the first 2 seasons of the show. Also, the first 2 seasons of Star Trek TNG used a lot of unused episodes written for TOS, which is why they feel so dated and kind of jarring, because, it might have worked with the TOS crew, It might have worked with that era of Star Trek, but by the late 80s, not so much. Even the look of the show changed because they apparently, the original cinematographer, his name was Edward R. Brown. And if you look at Star Trek seasons 1 and 2, the way how he lit everything, the way how the show was shot, it was a little bit darker. Everything was a little more flat, a lot more beiges. And then he got replaced by a guy named Marvin Rush, who would work on Star Trek from season 3 for the next... He started with season 3 of TNG, and he would work on this show for another 16 years. He is the man that made Star Trek look the way it did. That made this era.
That put him all the way through Voyager.
Yes.
Or almost through Voyager.
Yeah. Yep. And his cinematography is a lot more contrast. It's a lot brighter. There's a lot more contrast. There's a lot more colors. The walls aren't as brown. They're a little bit lighter in color. Stuff that I just find fascinating. And a lot of that, this looks like Star Trek to me. When you think of how Star Trek looks, it's this. It is this season that really establishes that. Like, let's look at the episode list here. We have Evolution, Ensigns of Command, The Survivors, Who Watches the Watchers, which is a fantastic episode, The Bonding, Booby Trap, which is a really good one. I think that's a highly underrated episode. The Enemy, The Price, The Vengeance Factor, The Defector, which is my second favorite Romulan episode anything. The Hunted, which is an interesting episode. The High Ground, Deja Q.
Deja Q is great.
A Matter of Perspective is an interesting episode. Yesterday's Enterprise is one of the best Star Trek anything. That's the one where the Enterprise C gets caught into a vortex, and suddenly we're at war with the Klingons, and it's bad. And Tasha Yar is back. The Offspring, which one is The Offspring? Because I get that one confused with the other one. Oh, that's the one where Data makes a daughter. The Offspring.
Val Vor.
Lol. Lal. Sins of the Father, which is the whole Klingon Civil War. And we get a really good look at Worf as a character, finally. Allegiance, I should say. Singular. Captain's Holiday, which introduces us to Picard's overarching love interest. Let's see. Tin Man, which I like that episode.
I think Tin Man is a good episode, but I think it is one of the weaker ones going through this list so far. I think it's a little bit weaker, but it's still not a bad episode.
No, it's not a bad episode at all. That's followed by Hollow Pursuits. I don't really remember that one per se.
Oh, that's the first one that introduces Barclay.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, introduces him.
That's a good one.
The Most Toys, Sarek, which is one of my favorite episodes of.
Sarek's great.
Menage a Troy, Transfigurations, and probably the best known out of all of these episodes, Best of Both Worlds Part 1, which still has probably the greatest cliffhanger of all time. But you look at that, it's like, Jesus, how many characters does that introduce? And like, I just sort of like went off the top of my head, and I'm like, holy crap, we already mentioned one. It introduces Vosh, which I've always found fascinating as a concept, that Picard would be so attracted to her.
Well, because she's the bad guy, his evil side, or not his bad boy side. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it totally works. You don't think it would work, but it does.
It does.
They have wicked good chemistry with each other in every episode that they appear in. I like how they even play that. What's the episode? I think it's later on. There's an episode of TNG where Picard dies. His artificial heart implodes or something like that. And so Q takes him back in time to kind of change things in the past, and things just don't work out very well for Picard because of things that he
ends
changed.
Up becoming like a science officer.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
Picard looks weird
because he never got in the fight with the
Nausicaan.
The Nausicaan, yeah. And he never got stabbed in the heart.
And when that episode came out, suddenly I was like, no, it makes total sense why he's attracted to Vosh. Because we see this other side, this reckless side of Picard, and I'm like, okay. And as he's gotten older, he's refined it, and I really like that. Plus, it is kind of funny to see Picard out of his element on Risa and everything like that.
It's almost like, he's such a stickler throughout all of the show, and then Vosh pulls that child curiosity out of him.
Yeah, which
And
again
yeah, I
isn't
liked
stuff
it.
that we saw in season 1 and 2. In season 1 and 2, he's almost as two-dimensional as you can get.
Yeah.
You know, a typical captain, stoic captain. Um, and I like that. I like that little sprinkling of that, which kind of goes into some of the things too. Now that Gene Roddenberry was upstairs, are you aware of what's called the Roddenberry box?
Is that where you can't have the story from one episode go carry into another, and he wouldn't do anything more than a two-parter?
Well, that was part of it. That was one of it. It was a set of rules that apparently Roddenberry set for the writers to follow. That was one of them. But the biggest one that drove everybody nuts, and Ira Steven Behr was the first to really run with this because he would leave TNG after this season and go start working on Deep Space Nine, developing Deep Space Nine. No interpersonal conflict with the crew.
You have to have interpersonal conflict.
Yeah, I'm like, how do we have a show without that? And the thing that always, and that was a big problem with seasons 1 and 2 in particular, was the lack of interpersonal conflict between members of the crew in particular, because you can't have character without that, or character growth because of that, which always fascinated me, because I'm a big fan of TOS and the TOS movies, right? Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are nothing but interpersonal conflicts with each other.
Especially in the movies, yeah.
And well, the movies are a bit different. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing. Are a little bit different because Roddenberry, after the first one, after the motion picture got promoted so much, actually he kind of was able to step away from the movies because after the motion picture, he started really kind of developing TNG. So I don't understand why. To him, it was like we've evolved past that. Because like I remember in there's a story about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where there's a sign at the beginning of the film that blatantly says no smoking on it, and Gene Roddenberry threw a fit over that because he said we as humans would have evolved past the need for that vice, and I'm like, who cares? Like, come on. In fact, I would think the yearning for vices like that would only increase in a post-scarcity society because suddenly we're not paying for it anymore. Suddenly it's all there willy-nilly. Now you can indulge, but
And we have the technology to, you're no longer going to get sick from this, so it's a personal choice.
This really introduced a lot of interpersonal stuff and a lot of character stuff, particularly with Worf and Riker. Those were the two in season 3 that I can recall that really had somewhat of the most character development out of all of them. With Worf, we have Sins of the Father, which is when it introduces not only Kern, but it also introduces the Duras family, who were the arch nemesis of the Moog family. You like the Klingon stuff, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I do very much.
Yeah.
I think it also helped Michael Dorn, and we were talking about this the other day, because I had wanted to watch a couple episodes to get back into the TNG, and I was rewatching The Survivors, and I jokingly said, "Oh yeah, of course season 3 is the best because it has that line that Worf says in the house, good tea,
Oh, good
nice
tea, nice
house."
house. Yes, yes.
And the reason that I think that that moment was a changing point for Worf and Michael Dorn, Worf had always been stern. He's stubborn, he's glory, and he's saying that to be nice, but he has to say it, all stoic like and tough guy like, but it comes across as funny.
It
And
does.
that
Yeah.
is a huge key and turning point for Michael Dorn and Worf that stayed with Worf throughout the entire TNG and DS9.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
in Picard, spoiler alert.
And this is one of the things that I love about Worf so much that doesn't really get explored until Sins of the Father. It is him coming to terms with the fact that he isn't a traditional Klingon, but because of that, in many ways, he is the epitome of what Klingons should be. Because he doesn't go into, he hasn't been infected by all the politicking that's been going on on Kronos and everything like that, and it's very obvious about that within this episode. It transforms the Klingons really from being these sort of two-dimensional villains that even the TOS movies do, to being really nuanced, a nuanced species. And I would argue, because this came out, this came out in 90. When did The Undiscovered Country? That came out in 91, so they were in production at around the same time. And something that I loved about The Undiscovered Country is it really brought in a lot of nuance with the Klingons. Like, one of my favorite decisions ever, and I wish the Klingons were depicted like this more, is that Nicholas Meyer approached the Klingons not so much as the warrior race, but he treated them like samurai. They kind of do that here as well. So they were kind of going on at roughly the same time. I'm like, God, we really got the Klingons in this era. We wouldn't have my favorite Klingon of all time if it wasn't for this, and that's Martok from Deep Space Nine.
I was going to say Martok is my favorite Klingon.
Yeah, we get Gowron. Gowron becomes a big deal because of this. There's another episode, too, that nobody talks about, but I'm like, this is a phenomenal episode. It's called The High Ground. Crusher gets abducted, which, by the way, Crusher comes back. She replaces Polanski in this. She gets captured by these terrorists, and it really goes into a lot of the discussions of, like, what is a terrorist? Define what a terrorist is. And it's such a wonderfully nuanced episode that we didn't have before in TNG, or even TOS, I'd argue. Despite the fact that we really sympathize with what the terrorists are doing. We understand what they're doing. We even like these characters that Crusher is talking with. They're still killing a lot of people, a lot of innocent people. And again, this being before 9/11, it's a very interesting and unique take that I don't think we'd see today in a lot of our stuff, because this was commenting on real life events. It was commenting on about the Irish Republican Army, and there's stuff going on with Britain, and the reunification of Ireland and everything was happening at around this time of this episode, and it was commenting on that.
That's why I like Star Trek, though. It's all political commentary.
I love political commentary. Yeah.
I may not get the exact reference it's going to, but I can think of, oh yeah, what was going on in the 90s? And then you watch some of these episodes, and it's like, wow, yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like then. I wish New Trek was doing that. Like, yeah, sure, there's some political commentary, but it's all, and I don't want to say woke, but it's too much in your face. It needs to be a little bit more subtle like that. I think that's a good episode of, like, it's not in your face, but it's saying, like, yeah, hey, there's some stuff going on in the world.
And it even has stuff with Riker, and there's this girl that Riker teams up with on that, and she is representing the government side of things, fighting these terrorists, and she does some horrible things too, you know. And I really like that, and it's very interesting. I couldn't help but wonder, though, because to me, even though Crusher is the one that gets, abducted in that episode, to me, I was like, this would have been a much better episode if that was Tasha Yar.
No, she was like a freedom fighter.
Kind of. Like, she was on this planet where she was sold into slavery, and she kind of got out of that, which is why she was now with the Federation and everything like that. And I'm like, this would have been a perfect episode for Tasha Yar, because
she would be a little bit more of a sympathizer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the dialogue would have been very interesting, because in many ways, and I think this is probably where her character would have gone had she stayed, she is almost as pure Federation as you can get, because she's seen the other end of it. She genuinely believes in everything the Federation kind of stands for. She would have been good for Section 31, probably. Or I think she would have become a bit of an ideologue for what the Federation is, because she's been at that low. There's one episode where they're talking about drugs, and it's not a great episode, but it's an interesting episode where there are these two races. They think there's a virus that's killing them, but really it's just because they're going through withdrawals from this drug that this other alien species has been selling them. Tasha has to explain to Wesley, it's total PSA and not handled very well, but Tasha explains, like, when things are dark all the time and bad and everything like that, people do turn to drugs as a way of escaping. And I love how she's the one to explain it, because she would know more than anybody else, probably, really
going
on the
on?
Enterprise. What's happening there? And I appreciated that. And I think they would have gone further with that if she had stayed. But people remember yesterday's Enterprise, Deja Q, Sins of the Father, Best of Both Worlds, certainly, but not the Offspring. I'm surprised the Offspring isn't talked about more. You love Data.
I do love Data. For those that may or may not know, I base my outfit off of Data, Lieutenant Commander, and the yellow uniform. That's a sad episode. Like, he wants to be able to procreate like any other sentient being, and it's kind of ripped away from him. So it's sad, and he
It
never really
is.
tries again.
That's the thing that I find interesting is he never tries again.
The best, I can't remember the exact quote, but the best thing that Data ever once said was like when one episode where Geordi almost dies, and it's later on in the show, and Data does everything that he can to protect Geordi, and Geordi at the end goes, Data, it's almost like you love me, like you care for me. And Data goes, that's impossible, Geordi. I can't feel love, I can't feel care, but I can get used to you. Because that's his way as an android of saying, I want to have that, reliability, that consistency of you in my life. But he doesn't, it's not love, but it's love to Data. And that episode is that again. It's why does he want to procreate? Oh, just because that's what sentient beings do. Does he actually care about her? No, but yeah, he does.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of there's an episode where Data kind of has somebody tries to mimic him. A little child tries to mimic him because like he lost his family and everything like that. And again, that was a little bit later.
This, isn't it?
No, because this season has what's called the bonding, and that was when Worf was leading kind of an away team, and
yes,
the kid
I
loses his entire family. Yeah, the kid loses his family because of it. And this is just something. This is the limitation of TV back then, but I would have loved this more than what they ended up doing with Alexander. Worf decides to essentially adopt this kid and bring him into the House of Mogg as sort of repentance for this, and they both kind of go through the tragedy of loss together in different ways, because again, this kid lost his family while Worf lost a subordinate, and they're still grieving. And again, we wouldn't have really had that, I don't think, in the previous seasons of TNG. And that kind of goes into the interpersonal conflicts that happen. Hell, in the first episode, Evolution, there's a great moment between Wesley and Crusher. Wesley's angry at her. It's like he's like, get off my back. I've been doing stuff that no other kid my age would have been able to do. Get off my back.
Than the actual cadets are doing.
Yes, exactly. And he's justified in saying this. She's like, well, you're my son and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, well, and I love this. You weren't here for the last year. You have no right to tell me this. And I loved that. And I'm like, this is stuff that was missing in the first two seasons of TNG.
I was going to say, Wesley in general in this season is not, shut up Wesley. He's a legit character that has his own flaws. And like you said, him relearning his mom throughout the whole episode, not just him being a cadet, unofficial cadet, but relearning who his mom is and having that work-life balance between she's technically my superior officer, but she's also my mom. I thought there was a lot of really good Wesley moments in this, whereas later on he kind of is just that, pretentious, snobby kid that is better than everyone else. But in this season, he's more relatable. And
he's definitely not as annoying as he is in season 1 and 2, and a lot of that was just because of the writing. I feel really bad for Will Wheaton, the actor, because just how horrible the scripts were that they were handing him, specifically making him annoying and stuff like that, despite the fact that Gene Roddenberry loved him. You also mentioned earlier, Jim, an episode that I didn't really want to talk about, but you brought it up, and it's a really good episode, The Survivors. The one
I think that's one of my favorite.
Holy
of
crap.
All Star Trek.
That is, again, it doesn't really expand on the lore of TNG or of Star Trek that much, but what an interesting concept of an episode.
You know what I was thinking to myself too?
What?
It's the 1990s. That dude is probably 70 years old, and he is in it, man. He
Oh, yeah.
accepts that he's an alien and in this. Just, my grandpa doesn't understand how YouTube works, but this dude believes that he's an alien and all of this technology is real. Mad props. He's in one episode and he's got 15 minutes of dialogue.
Well, yeah. And well, I also like just the concept of him being an alien on an alien world. This is probably something left over from TOS, because in TOS they do this a lot, where there's like the real omnipotent being that can control it. Kind of like Q. And he's that, and God, the performance. He gives a gut-wrenching performance. That one line he gives, when he finally explains what he did.
I killed the Vorhal or whatever.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, well, it's only natural that you killed the invasion. He's like, no, I killed them all.
All.
And I'm like, oh.
That was very deep. And
very
the thing
good.
is, he feels remorse. And what is Picard gonna do? Can Picard even imagine actually punishing him?
How can you punish him?
How?
Yeah.
He just wiped out, I think he said 40 billion. If he wanted to, he could have made the Enterprise vanish. He could have made the Federation vanish. But he didn't, because he feels remorse for what he did.
Picard obviously does not like this alien, because what he did is pure evil. That is pure evil, what that alien did.
Well, they said leave him alone.
Yeah.
He needs to be in solitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and also, again, if Picard did try to punish him, he could have just retaliated again.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, this is a phenomenal episode. Not an episode many people talk about in terms of season 3. Like, we actually haven't talked about. We didn't talk about Yesterday's Enterprise or Best of Both Worlds hardly at all. And those are like the two big.
Because everyone talks about them, like
exactly.
You said. But
and I'm sitting
other
here,
episodes are great in this season.
And I'm sitting here. I'm like, that's just a random episode in this season, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That hardly anybody talks about. And like, look at the episode with Sarek. That has one of my favorite moments, because and again, this is why Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard are the best Vulcans, in my humble opinion. I know you really like Tim Russ, and I like Tim Russ too, but to me, you can't top.
I would never say that he is better than Leonard Nimoy.
I didn't say better. I just know you put him on that list.
He's my favorite Vulcan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do respect Tim Russ, and I think Tim Russ is the only other person that truly understands what it is to be a Vulcan.
I would agree with that.
Emotions.
Yeah.
You suppress them.
Yeah, and because that's what Sarek does, and particularly that episode. He's got like their version of Alzheimer's, essentially, where it's like he starts losing that ability to control his emotions. Because a lot of people don't realize that Vulcans, despite them being the cold, more logical beings, are very highly emotional and highly volatile aliens. I mean, they almost destroyed. The reason why Vulcan is now basically a desert planet is because they had a nuclear war. They were about ready to annihilate each other. That is what's fascinating about that, because Sarek has always had, established in TOS, a very rocky relationship with Spock that doesn't get mended until Star Trek 3. And in this episode of TNG, Sarek, you have that wonderful moment where Picard, takes on all those emotions because of that mind meld. But he says the line, and it makes me tear up. And he's talking about Spock, and he's angry, and he's crying, and he's sad. It's all these emotions wrapped up in one great performance. And he's talking about Spock, and he goes, "I wish I could show you how much I love you."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it hits me right in the feels.
There's so much love that is talked about in that episode too, because if I remember correctly, Sarek's wife is in a lot of it too. And somebody asks her, like, how could you love somebody who's so emotionless? And she says, he loves me with all of his heart. He just shows me differently than you're used to.
Yeah.
And that, again, tying into the end of the episode when Sarek is dying and he does let all of that emotion out. Like, Vulcans are deeper than we give them credit for.
I gotta say, I agree with the sort of general consensus that Star Trek TNG was when not just TNG got good, people started going, oh, what's going on with TNG, and people started flocking to it.
It's when Star Trek got good.
It's when, yes, Star Trek was like back. It's like, we're back, baby.
You gotta let Riker
It's
grow his beard. But that happened in
exact.
two.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're fucking right. I totally forgot all about that. So Jim, I'm gonna ask just so we can wrap this up. Do you agree with that assessment? Is Star Trek TNG season 3 like the best of Trek?
I definitely think it's I I I would agree, and I didn't think about this until you said it. It's may not be the single best season of of any show, but it's definitely the groundwork for what was to be the next 7 seasons of DS9 and 7 seasons of Voyager, plus the 5 remaining seasons of TNG. It laid really good groundwork for this is Star Trek.
Well, I personally think it is the best season of anything Star Trek. If you want to look at a season on an individual level, where this is the only bit of Star Trek you'll ever watch or ever know about, this is it. Season 3 is where it's at, man. And it's hard pressing for me to say, oh, you want to watch TNG full through? Part of me wants to go give them like 5 or 6 episodes from season 1 and season 2 to watch, and just watch those episodes, and then go to season 3.
This is why when we started with watching Star Trek, we started with DS9 because it has a rocky first couple seasons, but I do agree. I think TNG's first 2 seasons are way more rocky, and it is a complete 180 when you get into season 3, like
Yeah.
from the get-go.
Well, Jim, it's time for us to end this, so why don't you pimp yourself out, sir? Like a
I would
Ferengi.
say that I stream on YouTube, but I don't really anymore. But I am James. I am a Trekkie. I love coming on these shows. I love talking to Adam with Adam about Star Trek. So thanks for having me, Adam. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Absolutely. I love talking about this. Thought this would be a kind of a fun, overarching episode where it's a little less focused and more of an overarching general thoughts of something, and I was not let down. But Jim, thank you very much for joining me. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you on the next episode of Welcome to 10 Forward. See you there.